Now, the second theory, Q theory, has better, in my judgment, better empirical credentials. Right? I mean, it has better, there's more empirical evidence to support it. So let me suggest to you what the Q theorists are arguing. Again, they're addressing the same question: why does the Supreme Court decide to hear this case and not that case? Or what goes into the decision-making process for the court to review a case? So we know what merits consciousness suggests. Q theory says that the probability that the Supreme Court will review a case or hear a case on appeal increases as the number of Qs that are present increases. This is, I like to, in introducing Q theory to students in introductory courses, I like to sort of suggest that it's kind of like predicting the weather. Right? The meteorologists, when they tell us that there's what is the percentage of rain in today's forecast? 90%. Okay, so when they tell us that there's a 90% chance of rain, what does that mean exactly? That have to be a little bit more specific. Okay, I don't want to digress too much on the whole matter of weather forecasting, but I'll say this just so I can kind of get to my point. I discovered that the local weather people, and it's not just true here in the greater Houston area, but everywhere I've lived, many of them don't seem to understand what that means. When I say there's a 40% chance of rain today, or 90% chance of rain, or whatever they say, I've heard them say things like, 40% of the area is going to get covered, and it doesn't mean, okay? I'm not a meteorologist. I don't pretend that I have, kind of knowledge of meteorological phenomena, but I do have a background in probability theory and statistics, and I know that it's a relative frequency. And what it means is that 90% of the time, if that's the number they're giving you, that in the past, when the atmospheric variables that we expect to be present today have been present in the past, it's rained 90% of the time. That's what that means, or 40% of the time, or whatever the number is. So with that in mind, I want to get you to sort of think about this Q theory as sort of that way. What it's saying is that in the past, when certain Qs have been present, the probability that the court, or the frequency with which the court reviews a case, is whatever the percentage is. Okay? So what are some of the atmospheric variables, or some of the Qs that the Q theorists are talking about? Again, it just really depends on the study that we're looking at. Not all Q theorists identify the same Qs, but there's some that they have in common. Okay? So first of all, the federal government favors Supreme Court review of the case, or some high-ranking federal official, such as the President or the Attorney General, publicly endorses Supreme Court review of the case. That happens from time to time. There'll be some case that's working its way up the appellate court, pipeline, so to speak, and the President of the United States, or maybe the Attorney General of the United States, or occasionally maybe a highly visible senator or somebody like that, will, publicly come out and say, this is an area of law that needs definitive resolution. The Supreme Court of the United States really ought to review this case. Now, we're not suggesting a cause and effect relationship here. We're not saying that the Supreme Court reviews the case because the President has said that it's a case worthy of their review, or the Attorney General, because the Attorney General has said it's a case that's worthy of the Supreme Court's review. It just may be a interesting association. It is very likely, for example, that if the President of the United States or the Attorney General of the United States thinks that this is an important case that deserves the Supreme Court's review, that there's at least 4 justices on the Supreme Court that see it the same way. You see what I'm saying? It's not because necessarily the President says so, or the Attorney General says so, or some high-ranking federal official says so. It just means that it may be a case that's more likely that the justices will also think is worthy of review. Okay?